Hello, and welcome to History Talk, the show where we talk about history, presented by Smith Gill. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to, for us, the most recent episode of History Talk, the place where we talk about history, in a historical sense. History, whatever. Anyway, get to the point. Today we'll be talking about Northern Ireland once again, and more specifically, the beginnings of sectarian violence. So, beforehand, Ireland is it's a state controlled by the English, but person to person, there is a bit of discrimination, but there isn't that much discrimination going on because there isn't much power really rested in. There are some natives who are in power, but most people do not have any power. But then when the state is formed, this begins to change because now you've got people who are specifically in power that are unionist, and now they see a threat in these nationalists. But beforehand, that was tough. This is the majority. If the majority want to be nationalist, then yeah, that's their right. But now that it's been separated off, now the majority actually want to be unionist of Northern Ireland. So suddenly now sectarian violence begins to increase, and this is one prime case is this: when Belfast workers, Catholic workers in Belfast, were just expelled from the shipping yards that they were working in. And these weren't just major, these weren't the owners of the shipyards. These were just the workers of the shipyards, and this really affected the change in the IRA, because beforehand it was fight the British, battalion of British soldiers come in, and there are obviously some bystanders, some people who do get killed in the crossfire, but they're not intentionally, as far as we know, going out there and attacking bystanders. But now this begins to change, because now the enemy is no longer seen as just the British, but it's also seen as the people who want to keep them there. Now you can be thinking, well, surely, yeah, I mean, if Northern Ireland wants that, then, you should let them, and vice versa. If Northern Ireland didn't want that, you should let them. And that's accurate, but the problem is that is not what paramilitaries would have thought. Because as violence begins to spread, it really it takes in the place of house burnings, evictions, kidnapping, rioting, assassination, and bombings. And you'll notice all of these things are, very civilian centralized. There are obviously kidnapping and assassination tend to be for more, persons who have the power, but a lot of the time, the violence begins to change to be really very sectarian, because you've got discrimination coming in, in a political sense, the unionists, and you've got groups such as the IRA, and obviously it's, I should clarify here, the IRA are now not just one group. The IRA refers to all different groups. So you've got the provisional IRA, real IRA, official IRA. So there are multiple groups of IRA things, and they tend to differ slightly in all different ways. Some are prone to, oppose to some policies, while others are not. And it's just, not all IRA groups are the same. But anyway, moving on to that, the IRA as a whole begins to use that kind of violence, and it begins to really reach a crisis point, because suddenly, after 6 months, after the first 6 months in 1922, 171 Catholics and 93 Protestants were killed. This was because of the IRA, the UDA, and all these different paramilitary groups on either sides that are, not only fighting each other, but also weirdly beginning to think it's okay to kill civilians, because there's this weird sort of idea that people begin to have when this happens, is that civilians are on this side, well then they deserve to die. That's not something you want, because you're killing people who have not taken up arms, have not campaigned, you know. In fact, a lot of the time there have been multiple cases where, they've, killed people who are like-minded just because they believe them to be. And this is a massive problem. And unfortunately, the Northern Ireland government does not deal with it in the proper way. Instead, it introduces some acts in an attempt to end the violence. However, it's an attempt to end the violence, not an attempt to kill the source of the violence, which is the fact that people are, for the IRA, it's that people are, not free from Britain is the real main point of it. Now, there are other people who are like, well, they're discriminating against Catholics. That's also true. As for the paramilitary troops on the Union side, well, it's a bit weird in that sense. They're kind of opposing the attempts to bring equality, which is a bit of a weird message to be sending, but Anyway, so they introduced in 1922 act known as the Special Powers Act. Now, this act, it could be seen quite easily as a bit extreme. It gives the power to the newly established police force, the RUC, or Royal Ulster Constabulary. But we're calling it Royal. I mean, I understand why you want to have a connection to the Queen, but you don't have to stamp the royal name and everything. But anyway, that's getting beside the point. This police force is now given the power to arrest people, but arrest them and essentially imprison them. But it begins later on to be specialised prisons that they're placed in. But these people are not given any trial. And now that might be, maybe you support that. But the problem is, they do not actually have the best knowledge. So what happens is, innocent people get arrested. And then those innocent people are like, well, seriously, I was arrested, beaten around the place, assaulted. They burst into my home, caused, thousands of pounds worth of damage. Burst down my bar, broke my door, all this sort of stuff. And then they arrested me for being part of the IRA. I don't even know anyone who's part of them, And then, sometimes, what would happen to these people behind closed doors? Well, pretty bad things. And then if they were ever released or imprisoned next to someone who actually was, guilty, or even just in general, you have to understand, if you imprison someone who you're giving a reason, but that reason is false. You're not saying, oh, we don't like you. You're saying, you did this. And someone's like, well, I didn't do that. And then you're saying, no, you did. Basically, what I'm saying is, if you arrest the guilty, and then when the guilty say, well, I'm not guilty of that, then you are causing a problem, because what can happen is the guilty then begin to, become no longer guilty. And this is exactly what happens. They begin to join the IRA. So the IRA just gains numbers out of this. And it does not help any tensions at all. Because it gains numbers of the IRA, which obviously leads to more violence. And also, the arresting of innocent people doesn't tend to go down with anyone who could be arrested. Furthermore, this new kind of power to the Minister of Home Affairs is given, and this is a one you might think is somewhat okay, and that's to make organisations illegal and ban parades. However, of course, this was used against protest groups. So if you were against an act by the government or against a particular policy of the government, well, that didn't matter. You could have your group just banned or made illegal, and any marches you wanted to have could be banned. And this is supposed to be temporary. Even if it is temporary, it's problematic. But it was not removed for 11 years until 1933. Now, one of the things that you'll see in the modern day are that there are well, technically grounds to consider redrawing the border in Ireland. Now, it depends what side you're on, but basically, if you cannot say to someone, you must be formed into this country. That does not make any sense at all. So there obviously are some ideas to solve this problem. Main one I would say that you could use is just not doing it. Just not trying to form Northern Ireland into Ireland. Just leave it alone. Second to that, you could do what was planned in 1925, and that was to redraw the border, but not to form it all into Ireland, but to actually redraw to add counties that would be predominantly pro, being part of Ireland in. And what this has the benefit of is you're not saying Northern Ireland ceases to exist, so you either go to England or just lose your connection with the UK. You're saying, no, you don't need to go to England. If, let's say, you make Derry part of Ireland, then you say, no, it's okay. No, because Antrim, Armagh, Down, Fermanagh, and Tyrone are still all part of Northern Ireland. So you can go to any of those places. And you can also introduce government things where you just go, well, the government will buy your house from you and will set you then up in another house elsewhere in the Northern Irish state, in your area. Now, this might seem a little bit too short, but at the end of the day, this is what a lot of people do in many countries, with the exception of obviously people who live in the city or people who move to the city, because they don't tend to move about. They tend to just move to the city and then they will have their job there, which obviously benefits some. But if you're not able to get a job there, then obviously you can't really expect to be paying the high prices of the city. Anyway, in the next video, we'll be looking at the ways that the politics in Northern Ireland begins to change. Join us then. Thank you for listening to this, an episode of History Talk. If you'd like to just click away on another video, that'd be good. After I say this, there should be some videos appearing up on the screen. You can click one of those. If you want to subscribe, they are apparently good. Didn't know that. Anyway, so if you want to subscribe, that's also good. So yeah, basically, if you go on all the videos, subscribing. Apparently sharing is good, but I'm not sure about sharing. Sharing is weird, because, what if you share it and no one views it, then, that's just a waste of your time. It doesn't take much time to subscribe, but it takes a bit of time to share. And why would you want to share anyway? Yeah, so Benny, basically. Yeah, goodbye then.